Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News program, and up next are tonight's top stories. Hamas draws a red line, no talks until prisoners are freed. The UN warns the ceasefire hangs by a thread, while regional leaders fear the occupation is edging toward another war. Up next, President Tebboune hails hydrocarbon nationalization as a game changer for Algeria's economic sovereignty. With an ambitious push to diversify exports, he eyes a future among the world's emerging powerhouses. Also coming up, Algeria and Spain tighten security cooperation. Interior Minister Brian Murad holds the high-level talks with his Spanish counterpart, reinforcing bilateral ties. Later on, Moscow stands firm. No ceasefire in Ukraine without meeting Russian demands. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov underscores that negotiations hinge on Kiev's concessions. More on this shortly. Welcome back to the detail. Kicking off our news tonight, Hamas leader Mahmoud Mardawi has drawn a firm line, declaring that the movement will not entertain any further negotiations with the occupation until Palestinian prisoners, whose release was agreed upon last Saturday, are set free. In a Telegram statement on Sunday, he underscored that Hamas will not move on to the next phase of talks unless the occupation first upholds its end of the bargain. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has sounded the alarm over the precautious nature of the ceasefire in Gaza. Addressing the Human Rights Council in Geneva on Monday, he stressed the urgent need for all parties to pull out all the stops to prevent a fresh eruption of hostilities, warning that any relapse into violence would be catastrophic.
We are witnessing a precarious ceasefire. We must avoid at all costs a resumption of hostilities. The people in Gaza have already suffered too much. It's time for a permanent ceasefire, the dignified release of all remaining hostages, irreversible progress towards a two-state solution, an end to the occupation, and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with Gaza as an integral part.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan on Monday sounded the alarm as well over the Zionist occupation's efforts to reignite the war in Gaza. Speaking alongside his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov at a joint press conference, he reaffirmed Ankara's staunch opposition to any attempt to uproot Gaza's residents, denouncing it as part of a broader Zionist scheme to destabilize the region.
We are deeply concerned about Netanyahu's push to reignite the war in Gaza and urge him to halt operations in the West Bank. We firmly reject any attempt to forcibly displace the people of the Gaza Strip. Israel is advancing a strategy to weaken regional countries, using its military power to push the region to the brink of disaster. The Netanyahu government continues its policies of genocide and territorial expansion in Lebanon, Syria and the West Bank, while seeking to uproot the Palestinian people. A two-state solution is crucial for the future of the Middle East, and it has the backing of all countries in the region.
The Zionist entity has once again stalled the release of the seventh group of the Palestinian detainees, leaving families on edge as they wait in anguish for their loved ones. Frustration is mounting, with anger spilling over as they denounce what they see as a blatant breach of the truce agreement. Salman Asif has the full story.
On Saturday, Palestinian families endured agonizing hours, clinging to hope as they awaited the long overdue release of their sons and relatives. But when news broke that the process had been postponed, their fleeting joy turned into bitter disappointment. Some, refusing to surrender to despair, vowed not to return home until they could embrace their loved ones once more. Hassan Yassin, 35, left Jenin at the crack of dawn, making his way to Ramallah to welcome his brother, Bilal Yassin, sentenced to 31 years behind bars, with 20 already served. As the hours dragged on, Hassan remained persistent. By Sunday, he had made up his mind he would not leave Ramallah without his brother.
Our emotions are in turmoil. We were over the moon when we saw my brother's name on the list of those to be freed. But in an instant, that joy was shattered. Yesterday was a heartbreaking day, yet our faith in God remains unshaken. If He wills it, they will be released. For now, we wait.
Khalid Sabah and his wife, the mother of prisoner Abdullah Sabah, who has spent 2 decades in prison, arrived at 9 a.m., hoping to witness the moment they had dreamed of for years. They waited through the night, their vigil stretching until 3:30 a.m. Still, they refused to return to their village. Their patience was more than just endurance. It was an act of defiance.
كان شعور محزن طبعا امبارح.
Yesterday was a day of sorrow. You wait, you hold on to that silver of hope, believing that after 20 years, you'll finally lay eyes on your son again. But that joy never arrived. I will wait, today, tomorrow, as long as it takes. I'm not leaving without my son.
Meanwhile, the Zionist entity declared that it would withhold the release of hundreds of Palestinian detainees until it secured guarantees that Hamas would end what it's called the humiliating handover of prisoners. With no sign of negotiations to extend a fragile ceasefire, its collapse could reignite hostilities, further deepening the suffering in Gaza, already ravaged by genocide.
The Zionist occupation is ramping up its assault across the West Bank, tightening its grip on Tulkarm and Nur Shams, where a weeks-long siege has crippled daily life with relentless raids, widespread destruction, and blocked humanitarian aid. Meanwhile, in Jenin, the offensive has dragged into its 35th day, marking an ugly milestone as tanks roll in for the first time in 23 years. The toll is overwhelming: 24 martyrs and a trail of devastation. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has raised the alarm over the escalating violence in the West Bank. Addressing the Human Rights Council in Geneva on Monday, he cautioned that any attempt to annex the occupied territory would deal a severe blow to the prospects of a two-state solution, warning of far-reaching consequences for regional stability.
Education by warmongers who thumb, and I'm gravely concerned by the rising violence in the occupied West Bank by Israel's settlers and other violations, as well as calls for annexation. We are witnessing a precarious ceasefire. We must avoid at all costs a resumption of hostilities. The people in Gaza have already suffered too much.
The European Union has decided to hit the pause button on sanctions targeting Syria's key economic sectors, including banking, energy, and transport. Announced on Monday during a meeting of foreign ministers in Brussels, the move comes as part of ongoing deliberations on Syria's economic turmoil and the shifting geopolitical landscape. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune hailed the nationalization of hydrocarbons as a watershed moment in the country's pursuit of economic sovereignty. In a speech delivered on his behalf by Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi, marking the 69th anniversary of the General Union of Algerian Workers and the 54th anniversary of hydrocarbons nationalization, Tebboune underscored its significance as a continuation of Algeria's liberation struggle and a cornerstone of true national independence.
The decision to nationalize hydrocarbons was a bold step towards securing our economic independence, strengthening our sovereignty over the nation's wealth and natural resources. The historic decision made by the country's leadership at the time, under the late President Houari Boumediene in 1971, was a natural extension of the spirit of national liberation and the driving force behind true independence. It embodied a deep sense of willpower, patriotic vision, and unwavering commitment to the ideals of the November Revolution and the sacrifices of our valiant martyrs.
Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune has reiterated his commitment to reducing dependence on hydrocarbons by diversifying exports, safeguarding future generations' rights to the nation's natural wealth. In a speech delivered on his behalf by Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi during the 69th anniversary of the General Union of Algerian Workers and the 54th anniversary of hydrocarbon nationalization, Tebboune commended Algeria's strides in the sector despite persistent challenges.
في ظل التحديات الراهنة.
Given today's challenges, while we take pride in the remarkable achievements of past decades in the hydrocarbon sector, we also recognize the expertise and efficiency of our executives managing our oil facilities, as well as the dedication of professionals and workers in this vital industry. At this stage, I would like to reaffirm our unwavering commitment to developing and implementing national policies aimed at transitioning from reliance on hydrocarbons to a more diversified export base. This strategic direction not only ensures that future generations benefit from their share of our natural wealth, but also paves the way for profitable investments in manufacturing industries, entrepreneurship, and business development.
On a similar note, President Abdelmajid Tebboune reaffirmed his commitment to advancing Algeria's economic standing, vowing to sustain efforts to secure the country's rightful place among nations eligible for the Emerging Countries Forum.
We have already made significant strides toward these goals, attracting thousands of young talents, drawing in both Algerian and foreign investors, and reaching unprecedented levels of non-hydrocarbon exports. We remain steadfast in our vision, determined to position Algeria where it rightfully belongs, among the world's emerging economies.
Algerian Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi on Monday presided over the foundation stone laying ceremony for a new oil refinery in Hamra Basin in Hassi Massoud. The project, designed to bolster Algeria's energy sector and reinforce self-sufficiency in petroleum products, marks a significant step toward economic resilience. According to the Algerian news agency, the event was held in conjunction with the 69th anniversary of the General Union of Algerian Workers and the 54th anniversary of hydrocarbons nationalization. Still with Algeria's related news, Algerian Interior Minister Ibrahim Murad underscored the significance of his visit to Spain in deepening security cooperation between the two nations. During talks with his Spanish counterpart Fernando Grande Marlaska at the Spanish Interior Ministry, he stressed the need for sustained coordination on shared challenges and the effective implementation of joint programs. Murad also highlighted the crucial role of specialized agencies in strengthening bilateral security collaboration. Experts at the symposium in Algiers on Monday concurred that French efforts to sway European opinion against Algeria have largely fallen flat. Instead, several European nations have signaled a growing interest in deepening ties with Algeria, underscoring the country's strategic importance on the regional and international stage. Zara Farjani has more.
Despite repeated attempts by certain factions in France to stir tensions between Algeria and the European Union, analysts argue that these efforts have fallen flat. Paris's bid to scapegoat Algeria for its mounting internal crises has not only failed, but has also exposed the widening gap between France's agenda and the EU's broader strategic interests. French elites, leveraging their political and institutional platforms, have sought to sway European public opinion against Algeria, a country that has cultivated strategic partnerships with key EU nations based on mutual benefit and shared interests.
In France, particularly within the far right, certain elites are actively inciting European institutions and public opinion against Algeria. Their aim is to push for EU resolutions that condemn Algeria, yet many within the European establishment advocate for reinforcing bilateral ties, recognizing Algeria's strategic position and vast potential.
Observers trace the surge in anti-Algerian rhetoric, spearheaded by the French far right and its allies, to Algeria's firm stance on revising the association agreement with the EU, a move aimed to safeguarding its economic sovereignty.
The EU-Algeria partnership is of a paramount importance to both sides. Expert analysis affirm this, particularly as we witness targeted disinformation campaigns, primarily orchestrated by factions within France, attempting to manipulate the Algerian dossier to serve their own political agendas.
Yet France's attempts to derail Algeria's flourishing ties with the EU have run into a formidable obstacle: the willingness of many European nations to deepen their cooperation with Algiers, recognizing its geostrategic significance and untapped potential.
كيف فرنسا تحاول توجيه السياسات الأوروبية.
How does France attempt to steer EU policy down an undesirable path? Despite Algeria's strong ties with multiple European nations, France persistently seeks to cast a shadow over these relationships to advance its own narrow interests. The key takeaway from this discourse is clear: Algeria's relationship with France must not be conflated with its broader partnership with the European Union.
وعلاقة الجزائر مع الاتحاد الأوروبي.
Both Algerian and European elites emphasize the necessity of distinguishing France's confrontational stance from the EU's broader diplomatic approach. Despite Paris's efforts to drag the bloc into an adversarial approach, many European policymakers see Algeria as a crucial partner rather than a point of contention.
Moving on to a different matter now, Sahrawi President Brahim Ghali has lambasted France for serving as the chief sponsor and shield of Morocco's expansionist ambitions. Speaking at the opening of the Polisario Front's sixth regular session, he condemned President Macron's recognition of Morocco's alleged sovereignty over Western Sahara, denouncing it as a blatant violation of international legitimacy. Ghali further accused France of hypocrisy, arguing that its stance contradicts its professed commitment to human rights, freedom, democracy, and justice. Since 2014, the Moroccan regime has expelled 316 international observers, parliamentarians, human rights activists, and journalists from occupied Western Sahara as of February 20. The latest incident saw the expulsion of 3 European parliamentarians last Thursday in what critics describe as an attempt to whitewash its ongoing human rights violations in their territory. The UN General Assembly on Monday approved the U.S. proposed resolution on the war in Ukraine following the incorporation of European amendments. Additionally, it adopted a Ukrainian-European resolution reaffirming unwavering support for Ukraine's territorial integrity as the conflict enters its 3rd year. The measure, championed by Ukraine and its European allies, garnered 93 votes in favor, 18 against, including unexpected dissent from the United States, and 65 abstentions. Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held a phone conversation on Monday with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha. According to a statement from the Algerian Foreign Ministry, their discussions centered on international efforts to secure a peaceful resolution to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, with a particular focus on initiatives put forward within the UN framework at both the Security Council and the General Assembly levels. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday urged for a genuine and enduring peace in Ukraine this year. Marking the 3rd anniversary of the war, he proposed a comprehensive exchange of prisoners of war with Russia as a crucial first step toward resolving the conflict.
Не віддасть його в обмін на щось. Ми маємо здобути.
The very start of this war, we have wanted peace, and now more than ever, we believe that real and lasting peace is possible if we stand together, of course. And it's essential that we work together so that when we negotiate with Russia, the strongest defenders of freedom are at the table: America, Europe, and the Ukraine.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reaffirmed on Monday that Russia will not cease hostilities in Ukraine until negotiations yield outcomes that align with Moscow's interests. Speaking at a joint press conference with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan in Ankara, he acknowledged that some countries have begun adopting a more pragmatic approach toward resolving the conflict. Russia will not agree to a quick ceasefire without a comprehensive long-term settlement, the Russian news agency reported on Monday. Citing Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, the report warned that any resolution failing to address the root causes of the conflict could have serious repercussions for the Russian-American ties. Ryabkov also acknowledged Washington's push for a swift truce in Ukraine, but emphasized Moscow's insistence on a lasting solution. Still with Russia-Ukraine file now, three years ago today, Russian forces launched what they termed a special military operation in Ukraine, igniting a conflict that redrew geopolitical lines, rattled economies, and inflicted immense human suffering. As the war grinds on, global powers are stepping up diplomatic efforts to broker a resolution, fueling both cautious optimism and lingering doubts. Yasin Rikti reports now.
Ahead of a UN Security Council vote, a US-drafted resolution to end the conflict stalled, facing resistance and failing to pass without European amendments before the General Assembly. Turkey has backed the US initiative, but with a condition: both Kiev and Moscow must be at the table. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan echoed this, calling for fair representation and reaffirming Turkey's push for a just and lasting peace.
To achieve results with this new peace process, Ukraine must absolutely be included, and this war must stand through mutually agreed negotiations. I've conveyed our fair position on this issue to Mr. Zelensky, to French President Mr. Macron, with whom I spoke yesterday on the phone, and to Mr. Lavrov today. We're ready to provide all kinds of support, including hosting the talks, so that the process can turn into a lasting peace. Our region is tired of blood, tears, and conflicts.
Meanwhile, the European Union is stepping up its role. European Council President Antonio Costa announced the March 6 summit on Ukraine, calling it a critical moment for European security, while the EU has also pledged fresh support.
We have to support Ukraine right now more than ever. We are discussing and hopefully can pass the 16th package of sanctions, which includes gaming consoles to shadow fleet, different aspects. And then we have also put forward a new defense initiative to support Ukraine with ammunition capabilities in the short term, what they need. So I also expect this political discussion to be moved forward.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen unveiled an additional $3.5 billion in aid, while accusing Putin of pushing for Ukraine's total surrender.
But again, I really appreciate the political will that is there. I would even say Ukraine, merits-based process, if they continue at that speed and at that quality, perhaps they could be earlier than 2030. So thank you very much for giving the impulse. And let's work hard on all sides really to keep the momentum up.
Sanctions keep piling up. The EU's 16th sanctions package targets Russia's economy, banning aluminium imports, blocking video game console sales, and blacklisting 73 ships linked to Moscow's so-called shadow fleet. As world powers maneuver behind closed doors, one question lingers: is this a real step toward peace, or just another chapter in a drawn-out conflict?
Since February 2022, Russia has undergone significant transformations. Despite facing sweeping sanctions and economic isolation, Moscow has managed to sustain growth, bolstered in part by unexpected gains from military exports. Sofian Kinturi reports.
3 years into the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, the geopolitical landscape has undergone a profound transformation. What was initially perceived as an attempt to cripple Russia through economic sanction and exclusion from global forums has instead spurred an unexpected economic shift. Rather than buckling under mounting pressure, Russia appears to be recalibrating its economic strategy. Military production in particular has surged to unprecedented levels, breathing new life into key industries and reshaping the domestic economy.
The West's efforts to isolate Russia seem to have backfired. Economically, the numbers speak for themselves. Nearly 100,000 new jobs have been created since the outset of the conflict, predominantly in the defense sector, a striking paradox of our nation under heavy sanctions. People here are adapting to the new reality. There is work for everyone who wants it. Unemployment is practically non-existent.
Meanwhile, Washington's new administration hopes to broker a resolution to the war by the end of April. But regardless how the conflict unfolds, one thing is certain. Russia's economic trajectory has taken an unexpected turn, bolstered by surging military investments and strengthened trade partnership, most notably with China for energy exports. Moscow is charting a new course.
Public transport runs efficiently. Medical services have improved. The only drawback is the rising cost of living.
As the world watches, Russia appears to be turning adversity into opportunity. What was meant to be an economic stronghold has instead become a catalyst for reinvention, challenging the very foundations of Western-led sanctions.
And that wraps up our news program for tonight. Thanks for watching. See you next time.